The old house settled around me with a sigh, the way it always did after a storm. But this time, the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. It was a space carved out by absence, a quiet that screamed where my grandmother's gentle humming should have been. The air, usually thick with the scent of cinnamon and brewing tea, now smelled only of dust and rain-soaked wood. Every creak of the floorboards under my feet sounded like a question I couldn't answer. It had been 3 weeks since we buried her, 3 weeks of me wandering these familiar rooms like a ghost, touching the cool, polished surfaces of furniture that held a lifetime of memories, my own and hers. The grandfather clock in the hall, a stoic wooden giant, was the only thing that kept a steady rhythm, its deep, resonant tick-tock a constant reminder that time was moving on, even if I wasn't. My world was a fragile bubble of grief and memory, and it was shattered by the sharp, insistent ring of the telephone. The sound was so jarring in the quiet that I physically flinched, my hand flying to my chest where my heart had started to hammer against my ribs. I let it ring 3 more times, the sound echoing off the high ceilings, before I finally picked up the heavy, old-fashioned receiver. "Hello." My voice was a croak, thick with disuse. "Sarah, honey? It's Brenda." My cousin's voice was like pouring sugar into a wound. It was syrupy sweet, but it stung all the same. We hadn't been close in years, not since we were children playing hide-and-seek in this very house. Life had pulled us onto different paths, mine rooted here, hers somewhere more glamorous, more fast-paced. "Oh, hi Brenda. I've been so worried about you, sweetie. All alone in that big old house. I just keep picturing you rattling around in there. It breaks my heart." The sympathy in her voice felt manufactured, a perfectly polished veneer. I could almost smell her perfume through the phone line, something expensive and floral that always gave me a headache. I'm managing," I said, my fingers tracing the curlicues on the dusty telephone table. "Nonsense," she chirped, her voice taking on a tone of cheerful authority. "I'm coming down. My flight gets in tomorrow at 10. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll grab a cab. I'm going to come and help you get things in order." Before I could form a protest, before I could tell her that I didn't need or want help, that my grief was a private, sacred thing, she had already said her goodbyes and the line went dead, leaving only a dial tone buzzing in my ear. I stood there for a long moment, the cold receiver pressed against my cheek, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. The house seemed to groan in protest, the wind rattling a loose pane of glass in the living room window, a low, mournful sound. Brenda was coming, and for some reason that I couldn't yet name, it felt less like a rescue and more like an invasion. The next morning the doorbell chimed, its bright, 2-note sound a stark contrast to the house's muted atmosphere. I opened the heavy oak door to a gust of damp October air and the overwhelming scent of jasmine. Brenda stood on the porch, a whirlwind of designer luggage and perfect hair. She was dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit that looked completely out of place against the peeling paint of the porch railing. "Sarah," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that was all sharp angles and the cold clink of jewelry against my back. Her embrace was stiff, her hands patting my shoulder blades with a quick, dismissive rhythm. "Oh, you poor thing. You look exhausted." She swept past me into the foyer, her high heels clicking sharply on the worn hardwood floors. The sound was like a series of tiny hammers, chipping away at the quiet. She dropped her purse on the entryway table, the thud echoing in the hall. "My God, this place," she said, her eyes scanning everything, from the faded floral wallpaper to the dusty chandelier. It wasn't a statement of nostalgia. It was an assessment, an appraisal. "It's exactly the same. Grandma never changed a thing, did she?" "She liked it this way," I said quietly, closing the door and feeling the warmth of the house wrap around me again, a meager defense against the chill Brenda had brought in with her. "Well, that's the first thing we need to tackle," she said, rubbing her hands together as if she were about to start a corporate takeover. "We need to let some light in here, air the place out. It smells like memories." She said the word memories, as if it were synonymous with mothballs. The first few days were a blur of Brenda's relentless energy. She was a tornado in a silk blouse. She started in the kitchen, her voice a constant, cheerful monologue as she opened cupboards and pulled out my grandmother's mismatched china. "We really need to get rid of all this," she'd say, holding up a chipped teacup with a delicate rose pattern. "Nobody uses this sort of thing anymore. We can get a simple, elegant white set. Much more modern." I'd just nod, feeling a lump form in my throat as I watched her pack away the cup my grandmother had used every single morning for 50 years. The kitchen, once my sanctuary of warm smells and comforting routines, began to feel like a sterile, unfamiliar space. The scent of Brenda's lemon-scented cleaning products scrubbed away the lingering aroma of baked bread and spices, replacing it with a chemical sharpness. She moved on to the living room, her pronouncements becoming bolder. "This couch has to go, Sarah. The fabric is so worn. And these curtains, they're practically disintegrating." She'd run a perfectly manicured finger along a dusty bookshelf. "And all these old books. Who even reads these anymore? They're just collecting dust." Each suggestion was a small cut. She was trying to erase my grandmother, to erase my entire life here. I tried to push back, my voice small and uncertain. "But Brenda, Grandma loved that chair. She sat there every evening to read." Brenda would turn to me, her face a mask of profound, pitying concern. She'd place a cool hand on my arm, her rings digging slightly into my skin. "Honey, I know it's hard to let go. But holding on to all this, it's not healthy. It's like you're living in a museum. You need to move forward. For your own good." Her words were always framed as concern for my well-being, which made them impossible to argue with. How could I say that her help felt like an attack? How could I explain that the scent of old paper and worn velvet was a comfort, not a burden? If I tried, she would just look at me with those wide, worried eyes, and I would feel foolish, overly sentimental, and maybe a little unstable, just like she was implying. The gaslighting started subtly. It was small things at first, so small I thought I was imagining them. My car keys, which I always, without fail, left in the small ceramic bowl by the door, would vanish. I'd spend 20 frantic minutes searching, my heart pounding with a strange, new anxiety, only for Brenda to find them sitting in plain sight on the kitchen counter. "Oh, Sarah," she'd say with a little laugh, dangling them from her finger. "You're so scattered lately. You need to get more sleep." An important letter from the lawyer regarding the estate, which I was waiting for, never arrived. When I called his office, his secretary, a woman with a crisp, no-nonsense voice, insisted she had called and spoken to someone at the house 2 days ago to confirm the mailing address. Brenda, when I asked her, just frowned, her brow furrowing in concentration. "A phone call? No, sweetie, I don't think so. I've been here all day. I would have remembered. Are you sure you didn't dream it?" I felt a dizzying sense of disorientation, like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. I started to second-guess everything. Did I put the keys there? Did I imagine the phone call? The house, once my refuge, began to feel like a maze, its familiar corners now hiding tricks and traps laid by my own failing mind. The air felt thick, heavy to breathe, and I often found myself standing in the middle of a room, unable to remember why I had walked in there in the first place. Brenda's presence was a constant, suffocating blanket. Her perfume seemed to permeate everything, clinging to the curtains, the upholstery, even my own clothes. One afternoon, I was in my grandmother's sewing room, a small, sun-drenched space on the second floor. It was the one room Brenda hadn't touched yet. I ran my hand over the cool, smooth surface of the old Singer sewing machine and breathed in deeply. The air here was different. It smelled of machine oil, fabric scraps, and my grandmother's lavender sachets. It smelled like peace. I was searching for a box of old photographs when Brenda appeared in the doorway, a silent, sudden presence that made me jump. "What you looking for, honey?" she asked, her voice startlingly loud in the quiet room. "Just some old photos," I stammered, my hand still resting on a stack of fabric squares. Her eyes scanned the room, a flicker of something I couldn't identify in their depths. Annoyance? Greed? "You know, we should really clear this room out too. All these scraps and threads are a fire hazard. And this old machine is probably worth something. We could sell it." "No," I said, the word coming out sharper than I intended. "This room stays as it is." Brenda raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. She took a step into the room, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper, the kind you use when you're talking about someone who's unwell. "Sarah, you can't keep everything. It's becoming an obsession. People will start to talk. They'll think you're not coping." "I am coping," I insisted, my voice trembling slightly. "This is how I cope. By being here. By remembering." "But are you remembering correctly?" she asked softly. The question hung in the air, insidious and poisonous. "The other day, you were telling me about that picnic at Miller's Pond when we were kids, and you said Grandpa was there. But he had already passed away by then. Don't you remember?" A cold dread washed over me. Had I said that? My memories felt like watercolors left out in the rain, the colors bleeding together, the images blurring at the edges. I couldn't be sure. I looked at her, searching her face for a sign, a tell, but all I saw was a deep, unwavering ocean of concern. I must have gotten confused, I whispered, turning away from her, my face hot with shame. It's okay, sweetie, she said, her voice a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. You've been under a tremendous amount of stress. It's completely understandable. That's why I'm here. To help you. She was twisting my grief, weaponizing my love for my grandmother and this house, turning it into evidence of my instability. And the most terrifying part was, it was working. I started to believe her. I'd lie awake at night in my childhood bed, the mattress sighing under my weight, and I'd listen to the house groan and settle. I'd hear the wind whispering through the eaves and wonder if it was just the wind, or if I was starting to hear things. The scent of lavender from the garden outside my window, a scent that had always brought me comfort, now seemed to carry a note of cloying sweetness, like something beautiful that was starting to decay. I felt a constant, low-level hum of anxiety in my veins, a feeling of being watched, even when I was alone. My own home had become hostile territory. The turning point came on a Tuesday. It was a gray, drizzly day that matched my mood perfectly. The air was cool and smelled of wet earth and dying leaves. Brenda had announced she was going out for a few hours to run some errands, a phrase that filled me with a profound sense of relief. The moment her car crunched down the gravel driveway and faded into the distance, it felt like I could finally breathe. The house exhaled with me, the oppressive weight of her presence lifting. I made myself a cup of tea, the real kind, the loose-leaf English breakfast my grandmother had loved, not the flavorless herbal bags Brenda preferred. I sat in my grandmother's reading chair, the worn velvet soft against my skin, and let the warmth of the mug seep into my chilled hands. For the first time in weeks, my mind felt clear, the fog of confusion and self-doubt receding just enough for a sliver of my old self to peek through. I decided to go up to the attic. It was the one place Brenda hadn't dared to venture, complaining about the dust and the steep, narrow stairs. It was my grandmother's domain, a repository of a life fully lived. The air shifted as I climbed the stairs, growing cooler and smelling richly of cedar wood, old paper, and time itself. A single, bare bulb cast a weak, yellow light, illuminating a landscape of sheet-draped furniture and cardboard boxes that rose like ancient monuments in the gloom. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just wanted to be surrounded by things that were undeniably real, things that couldn't be moved or explained away. I ran my fingers over a stack of old vinyl records, their cardboard sleeves softened with age. I lifted the lid of an old trunk, releasing a puff of air that smelled of mothballs and dried flowers. Inside, nestled amongst my grandfather's military uniforms and a collection of delicate, lace-trimmed baby clothes, was my grandmother's diary. I hadn't known she kept one. It was a simple, leather-bound book, the cover worn smooth and soft as silk. I sat down on the dusty floorboards, the rough wood snagging on my jeans, and opened it. Her handwriting was a delicate, looping script, the ink faded from black to a soft sepia. The first few pages were filled with mundane details, notes about her garden, recipes, comments on the weather. But as I turned the pages, my heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I had found the entries from about 10 years ago, a time when Brenda had come to stay for a few months after losing a job. The entry was dated May 14th. Brenda is proving to be a difficult houseguest, my grandmother had written. She has a way of twisting things. Today, she told me I had promised to lend her $500. I have no recollection of such a conversation, but she was so insistent, so full of hurt that I would forget, that I gave it to her just for the sake of peace. I fear she sees me as a foolish old woman, easily parted from her money. I must be more careful. I flipped forward. Another entry a week later. I found my good pearl necklace in Brenda's handbag this morning. She claimed she was taking it to be cleaned for me, as a surprise. The look in her eyes when I found it was not one of surprise, but of pure, cold fury. She is a convincing liar. So convincing, she almost makes me doubt my own mind. I have put the pearls in the bank safety deposit box. I don't trust her in this house. My breath hitched in my throat. The pages felt cold in my hands. It was all there, in my grandmother's elegant, precise script. The same pattern, the same manipulation, the gaslighting. Brenda hadn't just started this with me. This was who she was. She had done the exact same thing to our grandmother. A wave of cold, clarifying anger washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. It burned away the fog of confusion, the shame, the self-doubt. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being played. I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel outside. Brenda was back. I closed the diary, my fingers trembling, and clutched it to my chest. It felt like a shield, a weapon. I hurried down the attic stairs, my sneakers silent on the steps, my mind racing. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I hid the diary in my bedroom, tucking it deep inside a drawer under a pile of woolen sweaters that smelled of cedar. When I came downstairs, Brenda was in the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune as she unpacked a bag of groceries. "Oh, there you are," she said, smiling brightly. Her smile looked different to me now. It was a mask, and for the first time, I could see the cracks in it. "I brought some organic kale for a smoothie. We need to get you on a health kick. All this stress is terrible for your system." "Brenda, we need to talk," I said, my voice low and steady. The sound of my own confidence surprised me. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Of course, sweetie. What is it?" She leaned against the cool, smooth surface of the granite countertop, the picture of casual concern. "I want you to leave," I said. The words hung in the air between us, stark and simple. Brenda let out a small, tinkling laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Sarah, don't be silly. You can't possibly manage all this on your own. You're not well." "I'm perfectly well," I said, my voice gaining strength. "And I know what you've been doing." Her face hardened. The mask of sweet concern dissolved, revealing the cold, calculating woman beneath. Her voice dropped, losing its sugary coating and taking on a sharp, dangerous edge. "And what, exactly, do you think I've been doing? Other than taking care of you, cleaning up this filthy house, and trying to stop you from drowning in your own sentimentality." "You've been trying to make me think I'm crazy," I said, stepping closer. The air crackled with a tension so thick I could almost taste it, a metallic tang on my tongue. "Moving my keys. Lying about phone calls. Twisting my memories. You did it to Grandma too, didn't you? You tried to manipulate her for her money." A flicker of genuine shock, then pure, unadulterated rage, flashed in her eyes. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she hissed, her voice a low snarl. "You're delusional. Grief has completely warped your mind." "Has it?" I asked, a cold calm settling over me. "Or am I finally seeing things clearly for the first time since you got here?" "That's it," she said, her voice shaking with fury. She straightened up, pulling her phone from her pocket, her thumbs moving deftly across the screen. "I was trying to be patient. I was trying to handle this delicately, for your own sake. But you've left me no choice. I'm calling Dr. Evans. I spoke with him last week. He's a wonderful psychiatrist who specializes in cases like yours. I told him I was worried you were becoming a danger to yourself." My blood ran cold. She had already set the stage. She had been planning this. This wasn't just about the house or the money anymore. She was trying to have me committed, to erase me completely so she could have everything. The title of my grandmother's will echoed in my mind. "To my beloved granddaughter, Sarah, I leave my entire estate, for she understands the value of home and heart in a way others do not." Brenda must have known, and she was willing to do anything to take it from me. "You won't get away with this," I whispered, the words feeling small and inadequate against the enormity of her betrayal. "Oh, honey," she said, a cruel, triumphant smile spreading across her face as she put the phone to her ear. "I already have." She turned her back to me, her voice once again becoming a mask of practiced distress as she spoke into the phone. "Yes, Dr. Evans? It's Brenda Collins. I'm calling about my cousin, Sarah. I'm afraid it's an emergency. She's having a complete psychotic break." A profound, terrifying silence fell over the house as Brenda ended her call. The only sound was the steady tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a second closer to some awful, unknown fate. Brenda turned to face me, her expression a chilling blend of pity and triumph. It was the look of a predator who has finally cornered its prey. "He's on his way," she said, her voice calm and even. "He's bringing a colleague. They're just going to talk to you, Sarah. To help you. Help me." The word was a lie, a poison dart wrapped in silk. My mind was a whirlwind of panic. I felt trapped, the walls of my own kitchen closing in on me. The scent of Brenda's perfume was suffocating, a sweet, cloying cloud of deceit. I could run, but where would I go? She had already painted me as unstable to a medical professional. Fleeing would only make me look guiltier, more unhinged. I looked at her, standing there so smugly by the counter, and a different kind of feeling began to bubble up through the fear. It was a cold, hard rage. This was my home. These were my memories. This was my life. And I was not going to let her take it. "You think you've won," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "It's not about winning or losing, sweetie," she replied, condescension dripping from every word. "It's about getting you the care you so desperately need." My eyes darted around the room. searching for something, anything. My gaze landed on the staircase leading to the second floor. To my bedroom. To the diary. The proof. With a surge of adrenaline that felt like fire in my veins, I bolted. I shoved past her, the corner of the countertop digging into my hip, and sprinted for the stairs. "Sarah, no!" Brenda shrieked behind me, her voice a mixture of surprise and anger. I could hear the frantic click-clack of her heels on the hardwood as she scrambled after me. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my muscles screaming in protest. The familiar, comforting scent of old wood and beeswax filled my lungs. I reached my room, slammed the door shut, and fumbled with the old brass lock. It was a flimsy thing, more symbolic than functional, but it might buy me a few precious seconds. The click of the lock sliding into place was the loudest sound in the world. Brenda's fists began to pound on the door. "Sarah, open this door right now. You're not helping yourself. You're proving my point." Her voice was shrill, the sweet mask completely gone, replaced by raw, desperate fury. I ignored her, my hands shaking so violently I could barely function. I flew to the dresser, wrenched open the drawer, and plunged my hands into the soft wool of the sweaters. My fingers closed around the cool, smooth leather of the diary. I pulled it out, clutching it to my chest like a holy relic. The pounding on the door grew more frantic. I could hear the wood splintering around the lock. I had maybe a minute, 2 at the most. I backed away from the door, my eyes scanning the room for an escape. The window. It overlooked the soft, overgrown lawn at the side of the house. It was a 1-story drop, but it was better than the alternative. Just as the doorframe began to crack under Brenda's assault, I heard another sound from downstairs. The doorbell. A sharp, authoritative chime that echoed through the house. The pounding stopped. I heard Brenda let out a string of curses, her voice a low, venomous hiss through the door. Then, the click-clack of her heels receding as she went to answer it. My heart was a wild bird beating against my ribs. This was it. Dr. Evans was here. I had one chance. One chance to make them listen. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the air tasting of dust and fear. I unlocked the bedroom door and crept to the top of the stairs, the diary held tightly in my sweating palms. I could hear the low murmur of voices from the foyer. Brenda's, syrupy with false concern, and a man's, calm and professional. "Completely paranoid," Brenda was saying. "She's locked herself in her room. She's convinced I'm trying to harm her. It's been escalating for weeks. I'm just so terribly worried." "We understand, Ms. Collins," the man's voice replied. He sounded patient, but firm. "If you could just show us where she is." "She's right here," I said. My voice, clear and steady, carried down the staircase. Both of them looked up. Brenda's face went white with shock. Standing beside her was a man in a tweed jacket with kind, tired eyes, and a younger woman with a clipboard and a pen poised to write. They weren't monsters. They were just people doing their job, fed a story by a very convincing liar. "Sarah, honey, go back to your room," Brenda said, her voice tight with panic. "These nice people are here to help you." "I don't need your help, Brenda," I said, starting my descent down the stairs. I kept my eyes locked on the doctor. "My name is Sarah Jennings. This is my house, and my cousin has been systematically trying to convince me and everyone else that I am mentally incompetent so she can take control of my grandmother's estate." Dr. Evans looked from me to Brenda, his expression unreadable. The woman with the clipboard watched me with sharp, intelligent eyes. "That's absurd," Brenda sputtered, her voice rising in pitch. "Doctor, you can see how agitated she is. These are the delusions I was telling you about." I reached the bottom of the stairs and stood before them. I was trembling, but I held my ground. The scent of Brenda's jasmine perfume warred with the clean, almost sterile scent of the doctor's coat. "I'm not delusional," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I have proof." I held out the diary. Dr. Evans looked at the old leather book, then back at me. "What is this?" he asked, his voice gentle. "It was my grandmother's," I explained, my voice cracking with emotion. "She kept a diary. 10 years ago, my cousin came to stay with her. And she did the exact same thing to her. She lied, she stole, she tried to make my grandmother think she was losing her mind. It's all in here, in her own words." Brenda let out a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "She's making it up. That's just an old book. She's completely lost touch with reality." I opened the diary to one of the pages I had marked, the one about the pearl necklace. I held it out to the doctor. "Please," I begged, my voice breaking. "Just read it." He hesitated for a moment, then took the book from my hands. His eyes scanned the delicate, faded script. The woman beside him leaned in to read over his shoulder. The foyer was dead silent, save for the ticking of the clock and Brenda's ragged breathing. I watched the doctor's face as he read. I saw his eyebrows knit together in concentration, then lift in surprise. He flipped a few pages, reading another entry, then another. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Finally, he looked up. He didn't look at me. He looked at Brenda. And for the first time, his expression was not one of professional neutrality. It was one of cold, hard appraisal. "Miss Collins," he said, his voice losing all its earlier warmth. "This is a very serious allegation. And this," he held up the diary, "seems to be a very compelling contemporary account of manipulative behavior." Brenda's face crumbled. The carefully constructed facade of the concerned relative, the grieving family member, the loving cousin, it all shattered into a million pieces. What was left was ugly and raw. Her eyes, stripped of their false sympathy, were filled with a venomous hatred that was aimed directly at me. "You," she spat, the single word filled with a lifetime of jealousy and resentment. "You always had everything. This house. Her love. You think this little book changes anything?" It's the word of a senile old woman against a concerned physician's report. But her bravado was gone. Her voice was thin and reedy. She had been exposed, her lies laid bare in the sepia ink of a woman she had tried to cheat. The doctor closed the diary and handed it back to me. His eyes met mine, and in them, I saw a flicker of apology. "Ms. Jennings," he said calmly, "I think we have all we need here. It seems there has been a significant misunderstanding." He turned his cool gaze back to Brenda. "I would advise you to leave the premises, Miss Collins." "Now." Brenda stood frozen for a moment, her chest heaving. The color had drained from her face, leaving her skin looking pasty and thin under the foyer light. She looked from the doctor's implacable face to the unwavering stare of his colleague, and finally to me. If looks could kill, I would have fallen dead on the worn oriental rug. Without another word, she turned on her heel, her sharp stilettos striking the floor with angry, defeated clicks. She snatched her purse from the table and stormed out the front door, slamming it so hard that the glass panes rattled in their frames, and a small puff of dust shook loose from the chandelier overhead. And then there was silence. A different kind of silence this time. Not the hollow silence of grief, nor the tense, charged silence of conflict. It was a silence of release, of aftermath. The doctor and his colleague stayed for a few more minutes, their voices low and kind. They apologized profusely, explaining the legalities, the reports that would have to be filed about Brenda's false claim. But I barely heard them. All I could feel was the solid weight of the diary in my hands and the slow, steady return of my own heartbeat. When they finally left, closing the great oak door softly behind them, I was truly alone. I stood in the foyer, my fingers tracing the worn leather cover of the diary. The air slowly began to clear, the last cloying traces of Brenda's perfume dissipating, replaced by the familiar, comforting scent of old wood, beeswax, and the damp earth outside. I walked through the house room by room. It felt different. It felt like mine again. In the kitchen, I saw the bag of organic kale Brenda had left on the counter. I picked it up, walked to the back door, and tossed it onto the compost heap. I opened the windows, letting the cool, clean October air rush in, smelling of rain and freedom. That evening, I didn't turn on the television or play any music. I just sat in my grandmother's reading chair, the one Brenda had wanted to throw away, and listened to the sounds of the house. The gentle groan of the pipes, the whisper of the wind in the chimney, the steady, reassuring tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall. They were the sounds of my childhood, the sounds of my sanctuary. The house had been my prison, but it was also my salvation. Brenda had tried to take everything from me, my home, my inheritance, my memories, my very sanity. She had twisted my love into a weapon against me. But she had underestimated the strength of the roots that tied me to this place, and the power of a truth, written in faded ink, that had been waiting patiently in the dark, cedar-scented quiet of the attic. Holding on to the past hadn't been a sickness, it had been my anchor. And now, for the first time in a very long time, I felt the fog in my mind finally, completely recede, leaving behind the crisp, clear certainty of who I was and where I belonged.